Good morning, everybody. A week, a new Pasha. The portion of Mishpatim, which itself means laws. These are most of the laws between man and man. Beautiful Pasha. We start in the beginning of the Pasha. Today is Sunday. We learn the first part of the Pasha. And we're holding on chapter 21, verse number 1. And these are the ordinances, these are the laws that you shall put before them. So Rashi says, wherever it says and these, it seems this word and these is to separate from that was stated previously. Ve'ela moisev al shonim, when it says ve'ela, if it says ela, these, then it comes to separate from the previously. Va'ela, and these, the vav is and, so it comes to add on what was said previously. Meaning, just like the previous ones, the 10 Commandments were said on Mount Sinai, so too these commandments and all commandments were all originated from Mount Sinai. So Rashi says, what is the connection between Mount Sinai and these laws? Actually, the end of the Pasha is the laws about a Mizbeach. What is the connection? The laws of the Mizbeach, that a Mizbeach needs to have a ramp and not steps in the ending of last week's Pasha. What is that connection to this laws? This comes to teach us that you're supposed to put a court of law, which was a Sanhedrin, the highest court of law, was right next to the Mizbeach in the Beis HaMikdash. In the Holy Temple, they built the court, the high court, right next to almost the door that led to one of the doors that led into the court, led straight to the altar. Ashetosim lefneim, that you shall put before them. It's an interesting expression, lefneihem. So the Rashi says, the Holy One, blessed be, said to Moshe, do not think of saying, I will teach him a chapter or a law. And you know what? And 2 or 3 times until they know it well, as it was taught. But I'll not trouble myself to enable them to understand the reasoning for the matter and its explanation. So I'll just tell them the law, the dry law. Do this, don't do that, end the story. Therefore it says, Hashatosim lifneim. It's like a table with food and prepared to eat. You don't give this person flour and let him go and make the bread. You prepare him a whole food. You don't give him a raw food. You give him ready-made food. So too, you need to give them the Torah that they can eat. They can understand it, so to say. That's why code of Jewish law is called Shulchan Aruch, which means a set table. That's what they call. That's what's called Shulchan Aruch. It comes from this Lifneim. You have to put it like a Shulchan Aruch, like a set table. Lifneim. So Rashi says, for them and not before non-Jewish court. Your Jewish person needs to go to a Jewish court. Even if you know that the Goyish court, the civil court, a certain law similar to the laws of a Jewish court, do not bring it to their court. A Jew needs to go first to a Jewish court, especially with money issues. For one who brings Jewish lawsuits before a Gentile profanes the divine name and honors the name of idols to praise them. And therefore, you need to go to a Jewish court in Jewish law. Verse number 2. If you're going to acquire a Jewish slave, for 6 years, you're allowed to work with him. And on the 7th year, he needs to go free. So you cannot buy a slave forever. A Jewish slave, it's 6 years. So Rashi says, a slave who himself is a Jew, maybe you might say it means a slave that was bought by a Jew. So we know that that's already written. An Eved Knani, a non-Jew that's bought by a slave, by a Jew, has a different law. And the Jew that is bought by a Jew has a different, both have different laws. And what is the applied meaning? And you shall that they become bequeathed to them. It's concerning a servant purchased from a non-Jew. But a servant purchased from an Israelite goes free at 6 years. Therefore, the Torah states, should your brother, a Hebrew man, be sold to you, he shall serve for 6 years. And that is it. So Rashi's kisikna. What do you buy? What does it say? There was a slave market. So this was usually the hands of the courts. Kisikna means you bought it from the court. Why was the court selling slaves? So they weren't a slave market. The Jewish court is neither a slave market because they were condemned in court for theft, and now they owed thousands of dollars. How did they pay back? So they were sold to somebody to pay back the geneva that they stole. It states that he has no money, he shall be sold. So the court would call in and say, listen, you got to sell yourself. You got to now become a worker and pay off your geneva. And that's how, so you had a choice. Either you had money to pay for what you stole, or now you got to go to work and you got to pay off your debt. It became like a debt. Or you could be a person that goes into the court and says, listen, I don't want to start stealing. I have no money. So I need to be sold. I want to be, somebody maybe might buy me I have no talent. Maybe someone will buy me for cleaning his house. You might think that only if a person sells himself, but a person that's sold by court, he doesn't go out in 6 years. So already we know that later on in the Torah it says that law. So it's that over there it's talking to somebody who sold on his own account because of his lack of money. What does the Torah over here talk about? Over here it's talking you're buying a slave in court is when a guy who steals, and that's the law. So the court sells him, forces him to go to work and pay off the geneva, what he stole. So you have to pay back. That's one of the laws of Torah. You don't, there's no prison. You steal from somebody, okay, now you go to prison, and the person that you stole from didn't get his money back. Over here, the Torah forces you to pay back. A chavshi, at the 7th year, he goes free. In begapa yava, begapa yetze. If he comes alone, he goes out alone. In balishu, if he's married, v'yatza isha imay, and he shall go out with his wife. So Rashi says in begapa yava, he has no wife. That means begapa, he came with his own clothes, so to say. He has no, he's not a married man. So if he wasn't married, if he wasn't married first, you cannot make him marry. You cannot force him to marry somebody, to have, so to say, children. It doesn't belong to you to force him to get married. In Baal Ishahu, if he's a married man, his wife goes out with him. What do you mean his wife goes out? Well, his wife was never a slave. Who forced his wife into slavery that she needs to go out? So what is the meaning of the verse? But over here, the Torah teaches us. Magid HaKosov, the Torah teaches, Rashi says, that when you buy a slave, a Jewish slave, you're now responsible for the family. So you became a slave because you have to support the family. You have to support his wife. You have to support his children. That's why he became a slave. He had no money. He went into stealing, or he stole himself because he has no money. So that's like you took upon yourself a charity case, and you need to support his family. And it comes to the end of 6 years, you can stop your support because they are now not your obligation. Verse number 4. So we have a very interesting law of the Torah. If the master gives him a wife, that means a Jewish slave. He was married, and now the master has a non-Jewish maid in his house, and he decides that he's going to give this man to have a relationship with this non-Jewish slave maid, and they have children. Now, after 6 years, he goes free. What about this woman and the children? They continue to be slaves. But who yet to Begapa, he goes out empty-handed. So Rashi says, From here we deduce that the master has an option to give him a slave, Canaanite maidservant, in order to beget slaves from her. Or perhaps it means an Israelite woman. Therefore, the scripture said the woman and children belong to the master. Thus, he's speaking about a Canaanite woman. For a Hebrew woman, she too would go free after 6 years. And even before 6 years, when she develops signs of puberty, she goes free, as the Torah will soon say. Your brother, a Hebrew man and a Hebrew woman, that shall serve you for 6 years. So over here, the Torah talks about a non-Jewish slave, that a Jewish slave can have a relationship with this non-Jewish other slave in the master's home and have children for him. Very interesting law, and there's many commentators on this concept of why the Torah allowed this and what was the purpose of allowing this. It's a lot of different commentators on this. Rashi just tells you the simple shot, the simple meaning of the law. Verse number 5. If the slave will say, I love my master. Yes, I love this wife that I just got as Banei, her children. I don't want to go out free. So he doesn't want to go out free. After 6 years. So the master will bring him to the court. And they'll bring him to the doorpost. And he's going to give him an earring in his ear. As Rashi will soon say, why? And now he can become a slave. And La'ilam over here does not mean forever, till the year of Jubilee. He needs to go to the one who sold him, and he needs to bring him back to court. So he brings him to the doorpost, or the place, or where the mezuzah is. Why does he go to the doorpost of the mezuzah? So I'm sorry. So Rashi, it's a mashkif. Is where you put the mezuzah? I'm sorry. This Rashi that tells you what the doorpost is. Doorpost is the mashkif, the lentil, where the mezuzah goes, where we put our mezuzahs on a doorpost, on the lentil of the door. And the master and the court, not the master, the court will put an earring, like a hole in his ear. He put us in the right side. So Rashi says you might say the left side. So we know that oizen, that says the ozen by a matzayra, that it's on the right side. So too the over here it's on the right side. By mitzayra it's tanach oizen matah heyamanis. Over there it says openly the right side. Oizen ear. So Mara, why did the Torah say to make a hole specifically in the ear? So Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said, this ear, that heard on Mount Sinai, it says, you shall not steal. And he went and he stole, and that's why he got into the situation to begin with. Let him make an earring in his ear, that he should hear again. And if he sold himself, for whatever reason, he wants money, this ear that heard on Sinai, that you should be slaves to God, and he decided to acquire no master. Let him make a earring in his ear. So Rashi says, the Gemara continued. Rab Shimon would explain this pasuk in a different way. He said, why did he go to the doorpost? Why the doorpost? Why specifically have to go to doorposts? Why not the table? Why not the chair? Why the doorpost? Oh, my Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibusha says, this door in mezuzah, that this door, remember I told you, which door? I passed over the doorpost of the Jewish people. I showed them that they're different. They shouldn't be slaves. That the Jewish people, I made them free. Why is the guy selling him selling himself as a slave? And therefore he should make a hole. And he not only wants to be a slave, he wants to continue to be a slave. Rashi says, la'olam in the verse does not mean forever. It means until the Jubilee. And how do I know that? Because later on, Rasha's in Leviticus, it openly says that on the Jubilee year, which is the 50th year, it's a 50th year of Kalkun, not from the 50th year of a sale. The 50th year of Jubilee, we know that we go 7 times 7, and that comes to 49. Then there's the 50th year of Jubilee. Then in the year of Jubilee, everybody goes free. All fields go return to its previous owners. All slaves are freed. Everything is freed. So too here, everything is freed. So when it says la'olam, it mean forever. It means to the year of Jubilee. That would be the most a person could be sold. Depends when he's sold. If he's sold in the cycle of, he's already holding 30 years in the cycle, he's only been sold for 20 years. If he sold in the beginning if he sold himself in the beginning, then he'll have longer. All depends when the Jubilee is being done. The guy can resell himself again after the Jubilee. Another fascinating law. If a man sells his daughter into maidservant, to be a maidservant, she doesn't go out as free of slaves. This is a very interesting law. And over here, fascinating law. Look what Rashi says. We're talking about a young girl, under 12 years old. You might think even though she came into puberty, if he sold her before she goes out in puberty, so that she goes out, second a girl becomes to puberty, she is free automatically. I shouldn't be able to sell her if she's in puberty. So we're talking about a katana, somebody who's under the age of 12 years old. 12 years old. So that's over here, a Jewish slave doesn't go out like the non-Jewish slaves. A non-Jewish slave goes out. First, a non-Jewish slave is bought. He doesn't have the laws of 6 and 7 years. A non-Jewish slave that sells himself, the court sells him, can be a slave forever. Or he can be, or non-Jews sold him, he can be a slave forever. But he does go out if the master hits him. You're not allowed to abuse your slave. And if somebody hits him, B'Shem v'ayin, he punched him, he knocked out his tooth, he's free. But a Jewish slave does not go opposite. That's a different Jewish slave and non-Jewish slave. A Jewish slave, if you hit him by mistake, hit him by mistake, whatever, you hit him, he doesn't go out. But a non-Jewish slave, the second you abuse him, he goes out. That's what the Torah has to tell you. By a Jewish slave, do not work your slave too hard. Do not do that. They're not your property. You can just abuse them. So over here, the Torah tells us, elevated Sheishanim al Yevel, or either Yevel, a Jewish slave works 6 years or until the Jubilee. Or by a girl until she becomes into puberty. Every time, whatever comes first, whether she comes to puberty or 6 years or the Jubilee, by a Jewish slave, you have to let him free, and then you got to pay them for their damages. You hurt them. So if you knocked out a tooth, you're going to have to pay them for that. That's one of the laws of you hurt somebody, you got to pay him. You might think it means you don't go out even on the 6th year of the Jubilee. Therefore, the Torah already tells us, we know the law that when a Jewish slave goes out in 6 years or in Jubilee, there's no such thing as a Jewish slave not going out in 6 years or in Jubilee. So too, a girl goes out either in 6 years or in Jubilee, or in her puberty when she becomes 12 years old. Like say to but a Jew does not go out if he's punched out like a non-Jewish slave. Continue. Verse number 8. Reason that over here the Torah tells us the real reason why a person sold his daughter. He's a poor man. He has this beautiful girl. He wants to get her married. So he would sell her to this guy who had a son. And that was the real reason why he sold her into this family. Because he wants that the master's son should marry her. So therefore, if it's pleasing in his master who did not designate her for himself, then he shall enable her to be redeemed. Himself, let's say he does not married, or his son. The hefta, he has to redeem her. He shall not rule over her or sell her to another person when he betrays her. So Rashi says, if he's pleasing in the master, meaning that she did not please him to extent that he wanted to marry her. For he should have designated her and married her, and the money paid for her purchase is the money for her betrothal. Here the scripture hints that this is a mitzvah for the master to perform, designating for marriage with a maidservant, and hints that she would not require any other betrothal. Neither money nor articles of value would have been given to gift to her father in order to marry her. The money the father originally received for selling his daughter would now become the money betrothal to the master. So if he doesn't do that, the hefta, this means the master should give her the opportunity to be redeemed and go free. He too assists in her redemption. Now, what is the opportunity, what he gives her? That he deduces from her redemption according to the number of years she worked for him. And if she had been hired by him and was not a slave, how so? Let us say that he brought her for a mana, 100 zuz, and she worked for him 2 years. We say to him, you knew that she would ultimately leave at the end of 6 years. This means that you brought her each year of work for 1/6 of the mana. And now she worked away 2 years, which equals 1/3 of a mana. So here's accept the 2/3 of a mana and let her go. Lam Nochri, meaning that neither the master nor the father has a right to sell her to anybody else. The big deba, if the master comes to betray her and not fulfill the commandment of designation, and the father too, since he betrayed her and sold her, at this one he betrayed her, therefore they have no rights in her anymore. Then if he marries her to her son, because he's married, let's say the master's married already. Jewish law, a man can marry more than one wife, but he doesn't want to marry her, he should give it to her, he should marry her to his son. He has to give her all the laws of what he does any other girl that his son would marry.
Rabbi?
Over here, the master chooses her for his wife, for his son. It teaches us that his son also stands in his master's place to designate her as if a father so desires. And he does not require another betrothal, but he can say to her, behold, you are designated to me with the money that your father received originally for that value. So that says what means the laws of a regular girl, meaning sustenance, clothing, and marital relationship. He has to treat her like any other wife, self-understood. He has to treat her like a beautiful Jewish woman.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, you're talking about.
I really let me keep on going because I really don't have time.
Oh, okay.
I really don't have time. I apologize. Hold it till after the Tanya class, okay, please? After the Tanya class at 10 o'clock. If he takes another wife for himself besides her, according to Jewish law, you can marry more than one wife. You always need to treat all your wives, you need to give them equal sustenance, clothing, and marital relationship. And that's here we learn out in general the laws of the three things that everybody's obligated to give his wife is sustenance, clothing, and marital relationship. You're obligated to make your wife happy in these things. So that's this we learn to general marriage. In addition to her, you're not allowed to, from your maidservant, you're not allowed to take away from her, even though she got married to you through this way, through becoming a maidservant. She'era is food, ksusa is clothes, ainasa is sex. And you're obligated in these three things. Every man is obligated in Torah law in these three things to their wives. And if you don't want to do these three things to this maid, you don't want to give her, you don't want to marry her, so you don't want to take care of her for life. You have to let her out. You have to let her free. Because that was the whole reason why she became a maid, to be able to get married You don't want to marry her. You don't want to marry to your sons. You have to let her out. If he does not, Tzadashas, if he does not have any one of these three things to her, now what are these three things? He should designate to her either he should designate her for himself or for his son, or he should deduct the money and redeem her, to figure out a way to get her out of this servitude. Either redeem her, let somebody else redeem her, marry her, or marry her to your child. If not, you got to let her out. Did another meaning, and the maidservant beyond provides the male slaves. So the maidservant was different than the male slave, told self-understood, because the male slave you could keep for the total 6 years, but the maidservant was there for a specific purpose, and therefore you have these couple of ways of doing this. If not, you need to let her out. And when she becomes to puberty, because she cleanses when she was sold. If she was sold at 9 years old, you have 3 years to puberty. If she was sold at 10 years old, or she was sold 11 years old, or she was sold at this. So depends when she was sold. You have to wait till the years of puberty, and therefore it depends. If you sold, let's say you sold at 3 years old, I don't know, it's a crazy thing. Then the other 6 year comes before puberty. So it depends when she was sold. Whatever comes first, you need to work on that schedule. So when you bought this girl at 9 years old, 10 years old, as a Jewish girl, you knew exactly, as a maid, because she came from a poor family, you knew exactly why you're hiring her, and there was no secrets. So either you're gonna in the next 2 years figure out what you're gonna do. That either you're gonna marry her to your beautiful son, or you're gonna free her, or you're gonna redeem her, do something. But you got to do it. You have that time, and you knew exactly why you bought. As an owner, you knew exactly why you bought her as a slave. Verse number 12. I got to finish this. Maki ishva meis, you must. If a person strikes a man and he's killed, he shall be put to death. So Rashi says, Maki ishva, what does it come tell us? What does it tell us? What does the pasuk tell us over here? We know that it says that's in 10 Commandments. Murder, if you can murder somebody. And number 2 is, it says another pasuk, if a man strikes down a human being, he shall surely be put to death. So that's in Leviticus. So what is the extra verse over here? So over there, Rashi said, understand that even if he deals him a blow without death, over here the Torah wants to teach us that you don't have to shoot him to be put to death. The Torah, one who strikes a man and dies, meaning that he's liable only for a blow causing death. If it said he who strikes a man, and it did not say he strikes down any human being, I would say that he's liable only if he strikes a man. If one strikes a woman or a minor, how do we know that one is liable? Therefore, the Torah says a man strikes any makeh ish or mace, and then it says the other pasuk, makeh ish or mace, kiyaka kol nefesh. So we have kiyaka kol nefesh and makeh ish or mace. So it tells us that any person, referring to a minor or a woman. If so, what is the verse over here? He who strikes a man. I would understand that even a minor who struck and killed someone would also be liable. The Torah states, if a man makeh ish, that it has to be an adult. A child is not responsible if he kills somebody in Jewish law. Therefore, the Torah states, if a man strikes, but not a minor who strikes someone down. And if he strikes down any human being, implies even a non-viable infant. You would think even of a child that is chashom under 30 days, or that's a non-viable infant, a child under 30 days. Therefore, the Torah says, he who strikes a man, implying he's liable only if he strikes a viable infant, and one who's capable of becoming a man. And there's many, many laws. I mean, this is a tip of the iceberg. There's many, many laws. Verse number 13. If you do not stalk a person, and so to say, God brought you this tragedy to your hand. You did it by unintentionally. I'll give you a place, which is the Arei Mikla, the city of refuge, where you shall hide. So tzida, Rashi, is an expression of lying in wait. So if you didn't lie in wait, that's what the Torah says. So you didn't lie in wait. You didn't plan this thing. You didn't lie in wait and plan it and make sure. It's an interesting expression. When I do something terrible, I did something unintentionally happened. Well, why? So I blame it on God in essence. So here we learn, yes, God brought it to you. Because God doesn't bring something to a tzaddik. A tzaddik would not kill somebody unintentionally even. Why does it such a terrible thing happen to you that God brings that to your hand? You should even do an unintentional act. Is God is trying to wake you up for other sins and tell you, look at that. Look how the negative thing can come to you. And God forbid you can do even an act and that something terrible can happen to you. So that's what Rashi says. It continues that if a person murdered somebody and there was no witnesses, or a person has great sins, so God brings the two people together. And another person has other kind of sins. God brings these two people together, and the one falls on the other. The person that killed without any witnesses gets killed by the person who needs to do tshuva, needs to repent, and he has to now go into the city of refuge. So that's I'm going to give you a place to run. An unintentional murder has to go to the city of refuge, even in the desert. Verse number 14. If a man plots to kill somebody, with strength, with cunningness, it doesn't make a difference. Even from my altar, suddenly becomes a holy man. You should take him from the altar and take him to his death. He should be put to death. So that says even if he's a kohen, he's going to hold on to the altar. The altar is going to say, "Oh, I'm a holy man. I'm a servicing God." You send him off to his death. If he murdered somebody, he has to be put to death. Verse number 15. If somebody strikes his father and mother, this is a very interesting law, Torah law. If God forbid you hit your father and mother and you gave him a bruise, it's a death penalty. That's why the Gemara says you have to be very careful not to fight with your children, that they should hit you. That's come to teach us when you hit somebody else, you have to pay him. But when you hit your parents, you are liable for the death penalty. It doesn't make a difference. You hit your mother or your father, he is put to death. And whenever it says put to death, it's by strangulation. Verse number 16. If somebody kidnaps a man and he sells him, and he's found with in his possession, he shall be put to death. So that says, why is this? Since the law of kidnapping is mentioned elsewhere, since it says, should a man be found stealing a person from amongst his brother, meaning from the children of Israel, and he worked with him and sold him, that thief shall die, and you shall clear away evil from you with kidnapping. Imagine, Torah talked about kidnapping and how much, it's such a terrible thing today, so much kidnapping going on in our lives. And the Torah says the terrible thing, kidnapping of another human being, you put to death. That's, we need to give a death penalty for kidnapping. From here, I know that a man who kidnaps a person is liable to death. How do I know a woman, one who's intermittent sex or a hermaphrodite, kidnapped a person? We don't know if it's a man or a woman, one who is liable for death. The Torah says, whoever kidnaps a man and sells it, doesn't make a difference, man or woman. And it says here, and you shall, whoever kidnaps a man. I know the one who kidnaps a man is liable for death. How do I know if he kidnaps a woman? He's liable for death. Therefore, the Torah states later, stealing a person. And that's why you need both of these laws. Therefore, both of them verses are needed. That one verse left out. Other words, that's why a lot of times in the Torah, each verse fills in other different, that the other verse doesn't say. What means when you found him and you sold him? What means when Nimtzu Yadeh? That it was found in his hand. He sold him. He's not here anymore. So Shara Adam, when it says Nimtzu Yadeh, means that there's witnesses that say you kidnapped. Then that's what needs to be done. There needs to be witnesses that say we saw him with this person, kidnapped this person. We saw him, and now he's not here. The kidnapper is put to death. Mois Yumas Bechenak, he's done with strangulation. Actually teaches us that when David says Mois Yumas in the Torah, it's usually Bechenek, with strangulation. Verse number 17. Mekalel Ova v'imay, one who curses his father and mother. Mois Yumas shall be put to death. Whoa. Lama Nema. Why is it said? Since the scripture said any man, any woman who curses his father and his mother, it says that already in Leviticus. From there I know, only if a man curses his father, he's liable for death. How do I know if a woman curses her father, she's liable for death? Therefore, scripture says, one who curses his father and mother, it makes an unqualified statement, meaning whatever it's a man or woman. If so, why does it say a man who curses? In order to exclude a minor. A child is not obligated for death if he curses his parents. But an adult is not allowed to curse their parents. Mois Yumas, over here, Mois Yumas, over here, Torah says by stoning. Whenever it says his blood is upon him, it's usually it's usually stoning. And therefore, in Vayikra, Leviticus, you see for Rashi that most of these laws are repeated in Leviticus, and over there the Torah adds, subtracts, and we're going back and forth between between the Exodus and Leviticus. So over there it says that the young man will be stoned. Verse number 18. If a man will quarrel, never happens. One he will hit the other one, whether it's with a stone or with his fist. And the guy will not die. With Nafal and Mishkav, but he'll get sick. So Rashi says, why is it said? Since it says an eye for an eye, we know that already. It says an eye for an eye. So what is the pasuk over here teaching us? We learn that if one assaults his fellow, he must pay the value of his limb, which is if he amputated or rendered it permanently useless. But payment for idleness and healing, we have not yet learned. Therefore, this section delineates those payments. It doesn't tell us. So in the other eye for an eye, we know that we pay the value of an eye. If you hurt his eye, the value of a hand. If you hurt his hand, the value of a foot. But what about it now that he's been out of a job for the last 2 months? What about that? This is what the Torah is teaching us. With Nafal and Mishkav, he now is sick in bed and he cannot work. Verse 19. But if he gets up, Baruch Hashem, and he goes out and can support himself, and he's been healed, he still has to pay for his lack of work, that he didn't work for the last couple of months because of his injuries. And he shall provide his cure. So now she says, with his strength, Baruch Hashem, he got back his strength. Now, wouldn't it enter your mind that one who did not kill should be killed? But rather, the Torah teaches us here that they imprisoned him until it becomes apparent that whenever the victim will get well. He wasn't allowed to go away. That was the only time imprisonment. There was no imprisonment in Torah. So here you imprison him, hopefully he'll get well. And if once he gets well, you pay for his damages. But if a guy died, he put to death. This is the meaning. When one gets up and walks on his sport, this assailant shall be cleared. But before the victim gets up, the assailant shall not be cleared. He needs to sit in jail. Shifta Yitin. Shifta is enforcement. It tells us the idleness from his work due to illness. If he cut off his hand or his foot, we assess the payments, the idleness, as if he was a watchman or a cucumber field. Because even after recovery of his illness, he's not fit for work that requires hand or foot. And the assailant already gave him payment for the damaged value of his hand and foot. And it said, so now he has to pay him, he has to give him the value of his not working. So besides he paid him for the damages, he has to pay him for his lack of work, because now he took away his hand or his foot. Yerape comes to teach us that he has to pay him all his physician and hospital damages. That finishes the Chumash. Let's go to the Tanya of the day. Alter Rebbe explained in the previous statement, in the previous Tanya, the great joy and satisfaction that God has when a Jew subdues himself from doing a sin. And when he controls himself not to do a sin, there's a great revelation that happens above. And now the Alter Rebbe continues. Not only for not doing a sin does a great revelation happen above. Even things that you're allowed. Whenever a person sacrifices one's impulse, even a little while, says, you know what? I won't have this delight. I'll control myself. I'll have it in an hour from now. Any way a person can subdue his taivas, his desires, even kosher, is an unbelievable thing. When and he subdues the sitra achra desire, person who loves to eat, nothing wrong, it's kosher food. He pushes off the meal for an hour less. He learned Torah. So you know what? I'll eat another hour. That's unbelievable. As the Gemara tells us, that a regular person ate lunch in the 4th hour of the day. Shashishis, the sages would push off on to the 6th hour of the day. They'd say, you know what? We don't need to eat like the regular people 4th hour of the day. We're going to eat a little later. Push it off. Learn a little more. That's where they would go hungry for another 2 hours for that point to subdue themselves. Even though after they ate, they learned the whole day anyway. So what's the difference? Eating 2 hours earlier, eating 2 hours later. There were school students. There were students in yeshiva. But you know what? They said, let's push it off another 2 hours. If somebody restrains his mouth from saying things, control yourself from your mouth, from saying things, not because it's negative. Stop talking things. Talk some mundane matters. Stop, control yourself. Talk a little less mundane matters. What's going to happen? Unbelievable thing. There's so 2 thoughts in his mind. Even the slightest subjugation of the sitra achra here below, you don't know what happens above. The glory of the Eibishter is greatly elevated above. And from this holiness, you bring upon yourself an unbelievable holiness. Is by an unbelievable holiness you bring upon yourself to be able to serve God. So the Alter Rebbe again emphasizes that through our control a little bit, subjugate ourselves, whether it's in the good, surely not in the bad, but even the good, to control our desires. Wow, what an unbelievable thing happens above and the way it affects below. Besides the fact you're doing a mitzvah, it says, you shall be holy. And the rabbis say, what does that mean? You shall be holy. Tell me, what should I put on film? There's a mitzvah to put on film. Eat kosher? There's a mitzvah to eat kosher. So what does it mean, you shall be holy? And the answer is, sanctify yourself in what you're allowed. Sanctify yourself. Even though things I gave you, I told you could do it, sanctify yourself. Don't have to need everything. The expression, what is not allowed is not allowed. And what's allowed, you don't need to have. Not everything that's allowed, you need to have. Just because it's allowed doesn't mean that you need to have it. Yeah. Push yourself away from it. You don't need to have it. What means you sanctify yourself? Make yourself holy. Be holy. Meaning that even though you know in the truth you're not separate from unholiness, you have a Yetzer Hara. Your Yetzer Hara is an all power, all strength in you, like the way it was born. Nothing changed. But the Eibishter said, you know what? You're not going to get rid of your Yetzer Hara. You are subduing your Yetzer Hara. And by me, subduing my Yetzer Hara is unbelievable. It's v'yisim kadoshim. I'm becoming holy. You don't realize, the Alter Rebbe says, that we don't have to kill the Yetzer Hara to become holy. We don't have to get rid of the Yetzer Hara to become holy. We can have the Yetzer Hara and we can still be holy. In essence, this is so beautiful because we don't have to be a tzaddik to be holy, the Alter Rebbe is telling us. Every one of us, the Kadishta was talking, you shall be holy by every person. Every Jew should be holy. That's the pasuk. And the pasuk is telling us, if I only would subdue myself a little bit, even the things that I'm not, I'm becoming holy. This brings a person, because the more holiness he brings on upon himself, the more he pushes away any aspect of evil. Because he gets unbelievable light and unbelievable holiness from above, which gives him the capability to push off his evil below. And he's able to help him to get rid of it from his heart, step ma'at ma'at, little by little. Nothing happens overnight. I wish you a wonderful, beautiful day. This ends the Tanya of the day. The Tillim of the day is chapter 119, half of chapter 119, the 25th day of the month. It's half of chapter 119, and you will do chitas of the day. I wish you all a great day. Sarah, I didn't forget you. I just got to go daven. I will answer your question after the learning Tanya today. I know you come. So everybody's invited to come and learn Tanya. Continue learning Tanya today at 10 a.m. And see you later. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless you.